there is a certain amount of grief every day. You're losing the person you love.
Sometimes we're surprised at the strength we have.
Take care of you. Well, there won't be anyone to take care of the people who we love.
Can't say enough about caregiving groups, how helpful they are.
This video offers expert advice through interviews with Mary Ellen Geist.
For me, writing was it was my best therapy. I feel like my father, pushed through his Alzheimer's to help me write this book.
Dr. Kenneth Doka.
When you struggle with a person you love, you are both consumed by the demands of care, even as you grieve the loss of the person who once was.
And Joanne Koenig-Cox.
I was doing a lot of training in nursing homes and assisted living and the hospitals, and I just wasn't seeing anything that was positive. So I decided to write Learning to Speak Alzheimer's. All the things I had learned as a caregiver, many years ago.
And we'll hear from other caregivers about this emotional journey.
In the days when I was caregiving, it was in the early 70s, nobody had ever heard of Alzheimer's. Dementia was something that we related to older people. The kind of disease that my husband had was called senile dementia, which was rather humorous in a way because he was 43 when he first started showing the signs, hardly senile. The first thing that really changed knowing what was happening was one night when we were out for dinner with our best friends. And my friend had leaned across the table and she said, "How are you feeling?" Well, I was very pregnant at the time. Our son was actually born the next day. And I said to her, I'm okay, all things considered, I'm okay. And my husband looked at me and he said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, he's talking about the baby, that's all, just the baby. And he said, "The baby? I would have thought you could have told me first." He had forgotten. Grief is such an important part of this, and we all do it differently. I think we sort of expect there to be a sort of pattern of how we're supposed to feel. And of course, Kubler-Ross and others have taught us that there are stages of grief, and there certainly are with Alzheimer's. One major difference: most of the grief is done before the person dies.
Grief is a reaction to any kind of loss, and no matter what sort of loss you experience, whether it's a loss by a death or a loss because a person has significantly changed, whenever you have an attachment to anything, whenever you experience a loss of that attachment, you experience grief.
I think there is a certain amount of grief every day, and you have to face that. And you can't pretend it's not happening, that you're losing the person you love.
When we experience caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's disease, we may not recognize, and others may not recognize, the grief that is an inherent part of that. What we are grieving are all the losses we've experienced in the course of the illness. And as you cope with that grief, it's important to acknowledge it to yourself, even if it's not always being acknowledged in the world around us.
I described myself back in the 70s as a married widow. That's still, I think, applicable. I see so many of the people I counsel who are married widowers and married widows. They've lost their person, but they're still married and the person is still there and a viable part of their life. I think that grief is what sets us free. I think the fear of grief is what keeps us kind of rooted in a sort of negative situation, even after we've lost the person.
How did Jerry and I meet? How did we meet, Jerry?
Skating rink.
A roller skating rink. Jerry likes to say we've been going around ever since, right?
Yeah.
So we've been married since 58. No, So we've been married quite a while.
Marilyn and Jerry O'Neill live on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Marilyn is the primary caregiver for Jerry, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 12 years ago.
In some ways it was harder in the beginning because it was so unexpected you didn't know how to deal with it. And his emotions were all over the place. And it was very hard for both of us. But it sounds crazy, but I think it's almost easier now. But the beginning was really rough.
You begin grieving the loss, I think, unfortunately, when you get the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. You know, you begin saying goodbye, the long goodbye, as they call it, because there's no cure. It is fatal.
Alzheimer's is now the 4th killer of the American population. Isn't that sad? Sad. The saddest part of it is that we look at it with such sadness instead of realizing that these can be some of the best moments we're ever going to have.